Kevin, I need to talk to you about the rent. I can't keep paying it. I'm running out of money. My son looked up from his phone. We were sitting in his living room, the one in the apartment I'd been paying for since 2018. 6 years of rent. $5,400 every single month. What do you mean you can't keep paying it? I mean, I've spent almost $400,000 on you and Tasha in 6 years. My retirement account is empty. I took out a second mortgage on my house. I'm 62 years old and I have nothing left. Kevin set his phone down. So what are you saying? I'm saying I can't pay your rent anymore. Starting next month, you'll need to cover it yourselves. He stared at me like I'd just told him the sky was falling. Are you serious right now? Mum, we have bills. We have car payments. Tasha just lost her job. How are we supposed to come up with $5,400 a month? The same way everyone else does. You're 35 years old. You have a good job. You make $70,000 a year. That's not enough to cover everything. You know how expensive it is to live in this city. Then maybe you need to move somewhere cheaper. Or Tasha needs to find work. Or you both need to figure it out like adults. Kevin stood up, started pacing. I can't believe you're doing this. After everything. After everything. Kevin, I've given you everything. I've paid your rent for 6 years. I've paid your car payment, your insurance, your credit card bills. I've bought your groceries. I've given you cash whenever you asked. I have nothing left to give. Then sell your house. The words came out so casually, like he was suggesting I pick up milk from the store. What? Sell your house. It's worth like $600,000, right? You don't need that much space. Get a condo or something. Use the money to help us get on our feet. I sat there staring at my son. My only child. The boy I'd raised alone after his father left when he was 3. The one I'd sacrificed everything for. And he was telling me to sell my house so he wouldn't have to pay his own rent. Get out, I said quietly. What? Get out of my car. I'm leaving. And next month, you're on your own. If this sounds familiar, if you've ever been the parent who gives and gives until there's nothing left, stay with me. You can like this video and subscribe if you want. We talk about the families who treat love like an ATM and what happens when you finally say no. Let me take you back to where this started, because Kevin wasn't always this entitled. Or maybe he was, and I just didn't want to see it. It began in 2018. Kevin was 29, working his first real job after bouncing around for years. He called me one Tuesday afternoon. Mom, I found an apartment. It's perfect. Great location, close to work, but the deposit is pretty steep. Could you help me out? How much? $5,400. First month, last month, and security deposit. I had $16,000 in savings, money I put aside over 10 years of careful budgeting. But he was my son, and he needed help getting started. Okay, I'll transfer it today. You're the best, Mom. I'll pay you back as soon as I get my first few paychecks. He never did. That first month turned into the second into the third. Each time I asked about him taking over the rent, he had a reason why he couldn't. I had to buy work clothes. My car needed repairs. I had to pay off my credit card. By month 6, I stopped asking, just kept paying. Because that's what mothers do, right? We help our children. We give them a foundation to build on. Except Kevin never built anything. He just kept taking. In 2019, he met Tasha. 3 months later, she moved in. I was still paying the rent. Mom, with Tasha here, maybe we could split the rent, like you pay half and we pay half. Kevin, I've been paying your full rent for a year. When do you start paying any of it? I know. But Tasha's looking for work and I'm trying to save up. Just a few more months. A few more months became a year. Then 2. Then 6. Tasha found a part-time job at a boutique, 20 hours a week, minimum wage. She'd come home and complain about how hard she worked, how tired she was, how she deserved better. Meanwhile, I was working 50 hours a week at 60 years old, paying their rent on top of my own mortgage. In 2020, Kevin called with exciting news. Mom, Tasha and I are getting married. Small ceremony, nothing fancy. But we're going to need some help with costs. How much help? Maybe $10,000 for the venue and catering and her dress. $10,000. On top of the $5,400 I was already paying every month. Kevin, I don't have $10,000 sitting around. Mom, please. This is my wedding. I'm your only son. Can't you take out a loan or something? I took out a home equity line of credit, borrowed $15,000 against my house, gave them $10,000 for the wedding, kept $5,000 for emergencies. That $5,000 was gone within 3 months. Kevin's car broke down. Tasha needed dental work. They needed help with Christmas gifts. I kept giving, kept saying yes, kept believing that eventually they'd stand on their own feet and I could stop, but they never did. And I never stopped. By 2022, I'd given them over $200,000. My retirement account was empty. I'd cashed out my 401k, paid the penalties and taxes, and sent it all to Kevin. When I told him I needed to slow down, that I couldn't afford to keep helping, he said, "But Mum, we're counting on you. We've built our budget around your support. You can't just pull the rug out from under us." It was September 2022 when Tasha called me at work. I was in the middle of a meeting when my phone kept buzzing. I stepped out to answer. "Janet, I need you to come over right now." "Tasha, I'm at work. What's wrong?" "Kevin and I had a fight." "A bad one. I need someone to talk to, and you're the only person who understands him." I left work early, lost 2 hours of pay, drove 40 minutes across town to their apartment. When I got there, Tasha was sitting on the couch crying. Kevin wasn't even home. He'd gone to play basketball with friends. "What happened?" I asked. "He doesn't appreciate anything I do. I work so hard, and he just expects dinner on the table and the house clean. I'm exhausted, Janet. I don't know how much more I can take." I sat with her for 3 hours. Listened to her complain about Kevin, about how hard her life was, about how she deserved better. Then she said, "You know what would really help? If we could afford a cleaning service. Just twice a month. It's only $300. "Tasha, I'm already paying your rent. I know, and we're so grateful, but I'm drowning here. Please, Janet, just this one thing." I paid for the cleaning service, $600 a month on top of the $5,400 rent. 2 weeks later, Kevin called. "Mom, Tasha's car broke down. We need about $2,500 for repairs." "Kevin, you make $70,000 a year. Where's your money going?" "Bills, Mom. Everything's expensive. Can you just help us out? We'll pay you back." I sent the money. They never paid it back. November 2022. Thanksgiving. I planned to host at my house like I did every year, made a turkey, sides, pies, spent 3 days cooking and $200 on groceries. Kevin called that morning. "Hey Mum, we're actually going to Tasha's parents' house for Thanksgiving." Her mum really wanted us there. "But I've already made everything. I thought we were spending it together." "Yeah, sorry. Tasha's mum got upset when we said we might not come. You understand, right? We'll see you at Christmas." I spent Thanksgiving alone with enough food for 8 people. Christmas came. I'd bought them gifts, nice ones. A new TV Kevin had mentioned wanting. Clothes for Tasha, spent about $800 total. They gave me a card, no gift. The card said, "Thanks for everything, Mum. You're the best." I smiled and said thank you and pretended my heart wasn't breaking. January 2023. Kevin called with news. "Mom, Tasha's pregnant. You're going to be a grandmother." I was thrilled, genuinely happy. This was what I'd been waiting for. A grandchild to love and spoil. "That's wonderful. When are you due?" "August." "But Mom, we're going to need help. The baby stuff is expensive, and Tasha's going to have to quit her job. We can't afford daycare on just my salary." "What are you asking?" "We need you to cover our expenses until Tasha can go back to work. Maybe a year or so." "Kevin, I'm already paying your rent and your cleaning service. What other expenses? Groceries, utilities, car insurance, baby stuff, formula and diapers are like $400 a month alone." I did the math in my head. He was asking me to fund their entire life. At least $8,000 a month. For a year. I can't afford that. "Mom, this is your grandchild. Don't you want to help?" Using my future grandchild as leverage. That's what we'd come to. I increased my contribution to $7,000 a month, picked up extra shifts at work, stopped going out, stopped buying anything for myself. I ate rice and beans while they posted pictures of restaurant dinners on social media. March 2023. Tasha invited me to lunch, said she wanted to talk about baby shower plans. We met at a nice restaurant. She ordered an appetizer, entree, dessert, and 2 cocktails. The bill was $85. She pushed it toward me. "Thanks for treating, Janet. You're so generous." I hadn't offered to treat, but I paid anyway. Then she showed me her baby registry. I've registered for all the essentials. The crib is $1,800, the stroller is $900, the car seat is $450. Tasha, those prices area. Only the best for your grandchild, right? I mean, safety is important. You want the baby to be safe, don't you? I bought everything on that registry, $4,200, put it on a credit card I was already struggling to pay off. The baby shower was in May. Tasha insisted on having it at a fancy venue. "Can you cover the venue cost? It's only $1,200. My mom's paying for catering. I paid for the venue, and the decorations, and the party favors." Another $1,800. At the shower, Tasha's mother made a speech, thanked everyone for coming, thanked Tasha's friends for the gifts, mentioned Kevin's excitement about becoming a father, never mentioned me once, the grandmother who'd paid for the venue, the decorations, and half the gifts on the registry. August 2023. Baby Dylan was born. Beautiful, healthy, perfect. I was at the hospital within an hour of Kevin's call. I held my grandson and felt love like I'd never known. This was what it was all for. This was why I'd sacrificed everything. Then Tasha said, "Janet, we're going to need help when we come home, like daily help for at least the first month. Can you take time off work?" "I can't take a month off, Tasha. I need my job. But we need you. I'm going to be recovering. Kevin has to work. Someone needs to be there." "What about your mother? She has her own life. You're retired, basically." I wasn't retired. I was 61 years old, working 50 hours a week to pay their bills. I took 2 weeks off, unpaid, lost $2,200 in wages, spent every day at their apartment cooking, cleaning, doing laundry, taking care of Dylan while they slept in. On day 12, Tasha said, "You know what would be amazing? If you could keep coming for another month. We're just not ready to handle this alone." "I have to go back to work, Tasha. I've already been out 2 weeks. You care more about your job than your grandson?" That's how she did it. Every request wrapped in emotional manipulation. Every boundary I tried to set turned into proof I didn't love them enough. I went back to work. But I came over every evening after my shift, cooked their dinner, did their dishes, held Dylan while they watched TV. One night in October, I was so exhausted I could barely stand. I'd worked a 10-hour shift, drove straight to their place, made dinner, cleaned up, helped with Dylan. Kevin was on his phone. Tasha was watching a show. Neither of them had said thank you. "I need to go home," I said at 9 p.m. "I'm exhausted. Already?" Tasha looked annoyed. "Dylan's going to wake up for his feeding in an hour. Can't you just stay for that? I've been here since 6. I have to work tomorrow." "Fine. I guess we'll just figure it out ourselves." I drove home crying, not because I was sad, because I was so tired I couldn't think straight. And they treated me like the hired help they weren't even paying. November 2023. I got my credit card statement, $22,000 in debt. Interest charges of $400 a month that I couldn't pay down because every dollar went to Kevin and Tasha. I was drowning, working myself to death at 61 years old, no savings, no retirement, no future, except more of the same. That's when I finally added it up. Every dollar, every sacrifice, every boundary I'd let them cross. $387,000. That's what I'd given them in 6 years. More than half my retirement, my entire savings. Money borrowed against my house that I was still paying interest on. And when I held Dylan, I realized something that terrified me. They'd use him the same way they used guilt. They'd dangle access to my grandson like a carrot, keeping me paying, keeping me giving, keeping me trapped. That's when I knew something had to change. Before I had nothing left to give except the house I'd lived in for 30 years. It was December 2023 when I finally asked Kevin to meet me for coffee. I needed to have the conversation I'd been avoiding for 6 years, the one about them becoming financially independent. We met at a cafe near their apartment. Kevin showed up 20 minutes late, didn't apologize, ordered a $7 latte and a pastry, pushed the bill toward me without asking. I paid, like I always did. "What did you want to talk about?" he asked, scrolling through his phone. "Kevin, put the phone down, this is important." He sighed, but set it on the table, face up. "Still checking notifications while I talked. I need to stop paying your rent, I can't afford it anymore." That got his attention. He looked up, confused. "What do you mean you can't afford it?" "I mean exactly that. I've spent almost $400,000 on you and Tasha in 6 years. My retirement is gone. I have $22,000 in credit card debt. I took a second mortgage on my house. Kevin, I'm drowning." "Okay, but that was your choice. Nobody forced you to help us." The words hit me like a slap. "My choice? Yeah, we never asked you to spend that much. You offered, you wanted to help. You called me every time you needed money. You told me about your bills and your expenses and your emergencies. What was I supposed to do? Say no to my own son? I mean, if you couldn't afford it, yeah. That's on you, Mom. You should have said something." I stared at him. This stranger across the table, who looked like my son but talked like someone I'd never met. "Kevin, you make $70,000 a year. Your rent is $5,400 a month. That leaves you with almost $3,000 after rent. Where does that money go? Bills, car payments, insurance, food. Life is expensive. So you spend $3,000 a month on bills while I pay your rent on top of my own mortgage. Do you know how much I make? I don't know. Like $60,000. $42,000. I make $42,000 a year, and I've been paying your $5,400 rent out of my take-home of $2,800 a month." He blinked. "How is that even possible? I went into debt. I drained my retirement. I borrowed against my house. I destroyed my financial future so you could live in an apartment you can't afford." "We can afford it. We just need a little help right now. Until Tasha goes back to work." "Tasha quit her job 2 years ago. When is she planning to go back? When Dylan's older, maybe when he starts school. He's 4 months old. You want me to pay your rent for another 5 years? Kevin shifted uncomfortably. "Look, we didn't plan for things to be this hard, but we're doing our best. And you're his grandmother. Don't you want to help your grandson have a good life?" There it was again, using Dylan as leverage. I do want that. Which is why, starting in January, you need to pay your own rent. I'll help with Dylan however I can, but I can't fund your life anymore. Mom, we can't come up with $5,400 a month. Our budget doesn't work without your help. Then change your budget, move somewhere cheaper, get roommates. Do what everyone else does when they can't afford their lifestyle. His face hardened. So you're just going to abandon us, leave us to figure it out alone? You're 35 years old, Kevin. You're supposed to figure it out alone. That's what being an adult means. Easy for you to say. You have a house. You have equity. You have options. I have a house I'm about to lose because I took out a second mortgage to pay for your life. Then sell it. I thought I'd misheard him. What? Sell the house. It's worth like $600,000, right? You don't need that much space. It's just you. Get a condo or a small apartment. Use the money to help us get on our feet. In a few years, when Tasha goes back to work, we'll be fine. We just need help right now. The cafe went quiet. Or maybe it was just the sound of my heart breaking so loud I couldn't hear anything else. You want me to sell my house, the house I've lived in for 30 years, the house I've almost lost twice because of the money I've borrowed for you. You want me to sell it so you can keep living in an apartment you can't afford. I mean, yeah, you're our safety net. That's what parents do. Safety nets are for emergencies, Kevin, not for 6 years of life support while you refuse to grow up. He stood up, angry now. I can't believe you're being like this after everything we've been through. After all the times we've been there for you. When? The question came out sharp. When have you been there for me? Name one time in 6 years you've helped me with anything. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. We invite you over for holidays. I spent Thanksgiving alone last year because you went to Tasha's parents' house. That was one time. It was the second year in a row. And Christmas? You gave me a card while I gave you $800 in gifts. We don't have money for expensive gifts because I'm paying your rent. Kevin, do you hear yourself? You're asking me to sell my house while complaining you can't afford to buy me a $20 gift. You know what? Fine. Don't help us. See what happens. We'll lose the apartment. We'll have to move in with you. Is that what you want? Your grandson living in some shelter because you're being selfish? That's not going to happen because you have a job and you're perfectly capable of finding an affordable place to live. There are no affordable places, not in this city. Then move to a different city. People do it every day. And leave my job? Leave our life? That's your solution? My solution is that you act like the adult you are and figure out your own life. I'm done carrying you. Kevin grabbed his coat. When we lose everything, that's on you. When Dylan asks why we couldn't keep our home, I'll tell him Grandma chose money over family. He walked out, left me sitting there with 2 cold coffees and the realization that my son had become someone I didn't recognize. Or maybe I was finally recognizing who he'd been all along. 3 days after I cut them off, they showed up at my house. I was making breakfast when I heard the pounding on my front door. I looked through the peephole. Kevin and Tasha. She was holding Dylan. I didn't open the door. Mom, I know you're in there. Open the door. The neighbors across the street came out on their porch, started watching. Kevin noticed and lowered his voice slightly but kept pounding. We need to talk. You can't just ignore us. I called through the door. I told you both. I'm done financially supporting you. There's nothing to talk about. Just open the door so we can have a conversation like adults. Adults who show up at someone's house uninvited after being told no? Tasha spoke up. Janet, please. Dylan needs his grandmother. Don't you want to see him? Using my grandson as bait. I'd known they would, but it still hurt. I can see Dylan anytime you want to bring him for a visit, but if you're here to ask for money, the answer is still no. We're not here for money, Kevin shouted. We're here because you're destroying our family. Mrs. Beaker, Patterson from across the street, called out. Janet, you okay? Want me to call the police? Kevin spun around. Mind your own business. Kevin, leave, I said through the door, or I'll call the police myself. Fine, but this isn't over. You're going to regret this. They left, but I watched through my window as they sat in their car in my driveway for 20 minutes, probably hoping I'd change my mind and come out. I didn't. That afternoon, my friend Julie called. Janet, I just got the strangest call from someone named Tasha. She said she was your daughter-in-law and that you were having some kind of mental breakdown. My stomach dropped. What did she say? That you've cut them off financially, that you're acting erratic, that they're worried about you living alone. She asked if I'd seen any concerning behavior. Janet, what's going on? They're trying to make me look incompetent, so people will pressure me to keep giving them money. Julie paused. That's actually scary. How did she even get my number? Probably from my phone when she used to be at my house all the time. What are you going to do? Document everything, save every text, every voicemail, every attempt at contact, because I think this is about to get worse. I was right. That evening, my sister called from Arizona. We talked maybe twice a year. Janet? Kevin called me. He says you're refusing to help them with the baby, that you've abandoned your grandson. Did he mention I've spent almost $400,000 on them in 6 years? Silence. What? I've been paying their rent, their bills, their everything for 6 years. I'm 62 years old with no retirement left and $22,000 in credit card debt. I finally told them no. $400,000. Janet, why didn't you say something? Because I thought I was helping. I thought that's what mothers do. Mothers help their children become independent, not enable them to stay dependent forever. Kevin's 35 years old. I know that now. After I hung up with my sister, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Tasha. Since you blocked us, I'm using my friend's phone. We got an eviction notice. 5-day notice to pay or quit. We need $400 by Friday or we're homeless. Is that what you want? Your grandson on the streets? I didn't respond. 2 hours later, another text from a different number. Mom, it's Kevin. I can't believe you're doing this. We have a baby. What kind of grandmother are you? Then another. Tasha's parents said we can move in with them, but they live in a 1-bedroom. Dylan will have to sleep in a pack and play in their living room. Hope you're happy. Then another. We're going to have to surrender Dylan to foster care because we can't provide for him. That's on you. That last one made me screenshot and save immediately. Threatening to put a child in foster care to manipulate money from someone? That was a new low. Friday came, the day their rent was due. My phone exploded with calls and texts from different numbers. All of them Kevin and Tasha, cycling through friends' phones. Last chance, Mom. We need the money by 5 p.m. or we're evicted. Tasha's crying. Dylan's been crying all day. He can sense the stress. This is your fault. We're at the landlord's office. They won't give us an extension. We need the money. NOW. At 5,000 p.m. Kevin called from yet another number. This time, I answered. It's done, he said. His voice was cold. We've been evicted. We have 24 hours to vacate. Hope your boundaries were worth making your grandson homeless. Kevin, you have a job. You make $70,000 a year. You can afford a different apartment. Not with my credit. You think landlords will rent to us now that we have an eviction on our record? You've destroyed our lives. I stopped enabling you. There's a difference. You know what? Fine. We're going to do what we have to do. But remember, this was your choice. He hung up. That night, I couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about Dylan. About my grandson in whatever situation Kevin and Tasha had gotten themselves into. But I also knew if I gave in now, this would never end. They'd learn that enough pressure, enough guilt, enough threats would break me. And I'd spend the rest of my life funding their choices. Sunday morning, I got a call from Adult Protective Services. Ms. Turner? This is Sarah Chen from APS. We received a report of concern about you. Your son called saying you're showing signs of dementia and may not be capable of managing your finances. We'd like to do a welfare check. My blood ran cold. They were actually doing it. Trying to have me declared incompetent so they could take control of my money. When? I asked, my voice steady even though my hands were shaking. Would today at 2 p.m. work? I called my friend Julie immediately after. They called APS. They're trying to say I'm incompetent. Oh my God. Janet, you need a lawyer right now. It's Sunday. Lawyers aren't open. Then you need documentation. Bank statements, bills, proof you're managing everything fine before that social worker gets there. I spent the next 3 hours printing everything. My bank statements showing regular bill payments, my mortgage payments, always on time, my work schedule showing I was employed and reliable, medical records showing I was healthy, character references from friends and co-workers. At exactly 2 p.m., there was a knock on my door. A woman in her 40s stood there with a clipboard. Miss Turner? I'm Sarah Chen from Adult Protective Services. May I come in? I let her in, offered her coffee, showed her my home clean and organized, showed her my documentation, answered every question clearly and precisely. Your son said you've been acting erratically, giving away large sums of money, making poor financial decisions. I have been giving large sums of money to him. Almost $400,000 over 6 years. I recently stopped. That's why he called you. I showed her my bank records, the transfers to Kevin's landlord, the cash gifts, the credit card debt I'd accumulated funding their life. Sarah's expression changed as she reviewed the documents. Miss Turner, this doesn't look like someone who's incompetent. This looks like financial exploitation. By my own son. Yes. She closed her folder. I'm going to close this case. You're clearly capable of managing your affairs. In fact, I'm going to give you some resources about financial abuse by family members. What your son did, calling APS when you set boundaries, Anne, that's a form of manipulation. After she left, I sat in my living room shaking, not from fear, from rage. They'd tried to have me declared incompetent, tried to take away my autonomy, my independence, my right to say no to them. Monday morning, I was sitting in a lawyer's office. Her name was Patricia Morrison, a family law attorney specializing in elder financial abuse. The APS worker, Sarah, had given me her card. Tell me everything, Patricia said. I laid it all out. 6 years, $387,000, every transfer, every loan, every guilt trip, the APS call, the threats, the attempts to declare me incompetent. Patricia took notes, her expression getting grimmer with each detail. This is textbook elder financial abuse, she said when I finished. Your son systematically drained your finances while you were in a vulnerable position as his mother. The APS call was retaliation for setting boundaries. That's illegal. Can I get any of the money back? Possibly. We can file a civil claim for undue influence and financial exploitation. Document every transfer. We'll also file for a restraining order based on the harassment and the false APS report. A restraining order against my own son. Janet, he threatened you, harassed you, filed a false report trying to have you declared incompetent, and used your grandson as leverage. Yes, a restraining order? I signed the paperwork that day. Patricia filed everything by Wednesday. Thursday afternoon, Kevin called from another new number. I let it go to voicemail. Mom, what the fuck? A restraining order? Are you insane? We're family. You can't do this. The voicemail ended with him screaming obscenities. Patricia told me to save it. That's evidence of harassment. Keep saving everything. Friday, Kevin and Tasha were served with papers, a temporary restraining order requiring them to stay 100 yards away from me, my home, and my workplace, and a lawsuit demanding repayment of the money I documented giving them with the understanding it would be repaid. My phone exploded. Text from Tasha's phone, "You're suing us? We're family, how dare you?" Text from Kevin, "This is insane. You gave us that money. You can't sue us for gifts." Text from Tasha, "We're going to countersue for grandparents' rights. You'll never see Dylan again." That last one hurt, but Patricia had warned me they'd use Dylan as their weapon. Saturday morning, I was gardening when a car pulled up. Not Kevin's. A woman I didn't recognize got out, walked right up to my driveway. Janet Turner. Who's asking? I'm Melissa Hart, reporter for the local news. I understand you're suing your son for nearly $400,000 while he has a new baby. Can you comment? My stomach dropped. They'd called the media. No comment. Please leave my property. Is it true you cut off financial support while your grandson was living with them? Some people are saying. I said no comment. Leave now or I'm calling the police. She left, but not before taking pictures of my house. That evening, a story appeared on the local news website. Grandmother sues, son for gifts, cuts off support to family with newborn. The article made me sound like a monster. Painted Kevin and Tasha as struggling young parents abandoned by a wealthy, vindictive mother. Didn't mention the 6 years of support, the hundreds of thousands of dollars, the second mortgage on my house, just wealthy grandmother sues poor son with baby. Comments poured in. What kind of grandmother does this? She's probably got dementia and doesn't remember giving them the money. Those poor parents and that innocent baby, Julie called, furious. Have you seen this? I'm reading it now. This is character assassination. Can you sue them for this? Patricia says we focus on the case. The truth will come out in court. But the damage was done. Neighbors started looking at me differently. Someone left a note on my car. Shame on you for abandoning your family. The following week, the court hearing for the permanent restraining order. I sat on one side with Patricia. Kevin and Tasha sat on the other with their lawyer, a young man who looked fresh out of law school. The judge reviewed the evidence. The APS call, the harassment, the threats, the text about putting Dylan in foster care. Kevin's lawyer argued, "Your Honor, this is a family dispute." Mr. Turner was simply trying to have a conversation with his mother about her erratic behavior. The APS call was made out of genuine concern. Patricia stood. "Your Honor, Ms. Turner's bank records show she's been managing her finances perfectly. She pays all her bills on time, maintains her home, works full-time. The only erratic behavior was finally saying no to funding her adult son's lifestyle." The APS call was retaliation, pure and simple. She presented Sarah Chen's report, the one that concluded I was competent and had been financially exploited. The judge read it, looked at Kevin. "Mr. Turner, did your mother give you approximately $387,000 over 6 years? Kevin shifted. "She helped us out financially, yes." "Did you pay any of it back?" "Some of it. She said it was fine." "She said we were family. Do you have proof she forgave the debt? It was verbal. She never asked for it back until now." Patricia submitted the texts. The ones where Kevin said they built their budget around my support. The ones where Tasha said, "We need you." The judge granted the permanent restraining order. Kevin and Tasha had to stay 100 yards away from me at all times. As we left the courtroom, I heard Tasha crying. "How are we supposed to let her see Dylan if she has a restraining order against us?" Kevin's voice was loud enough for me to hear. "That's the point. She'll have to drop the lawsuit if she wants to see her grandson." Still trying to use Dylan as leverage, even after everything. 2 weeks later, the civil case had a preliminary hearing. Kevin's lawyer tried to have it dismissed, arguing that gifts between family members can't be reclaimed. Patricia presented evidence, text messages where Kevin said he'd pay me back, where he asked to borrow money, where he acknowledged these weren't gifts, but loans. The judge denied the dismissal. "There's sufficient evidence this was an expectation of repayment. We'll proceed to trial." Trial was set for 3 months out. In the meantime, I started seeing the consequences of my decision in ways I hadn't expected. Kevin posted on social media, "When your own mother sues you and turns her back on her grandson, praying for God to soften her heart." It got 247 shares, comments full of people calling me terrible names. But it also got attention from my sister, who commented, "Interesting how you left out the $387,000 she gave you over 6 years. Tell the whole story, Kevin." Her comment got 89 likes. Then Julie commented, "This terrible grandmother emptied her retirement and took a second mortgage on her house to support you. She's 62 and has nothing left. You're 35 with a job. Grow up." 312 likes. The truth was starting to come out. People who knew me started commenting, co-workers, friends, neighbors who'd watched me work myself to exhaustion for years. Janet worked double shifts to help her son. "This post is disgusting. I've known Janet for 20 years. She's the most generous person I know. What did you do to make her say no?" Kevin deleted the post. But the damage was mutual now. Everyone in our small community knew we were in a legal battle. Some sided with him, some with me. I'd become the grandmother who sued her own son. He'd become the son who drained his mother dry. Neither reputation was good, but at least mine was honest. 1 month before trial, Tasha called me from another number. I recognized her voice immediately. "Janet, please, let's settle this. Drop the lawsuit and we'll figure something out." "You mean you'll let me see Dylan if I give up the money?" "We can work something out. Kevin's willing to pay you back. Maybe 100 a month. 100 a month would take 322 years to pay back what you owe me." "We're trying. We can't afford more than that." "Then you'll pay me what the court decides. If you can't afford it, they'll garnish Kevin's wages." "You'd do that? Take money from your grandson's father?" "I gave that money to my grandson's father for 6 years. Now I'm taking back what's mine." She hung up. The attacks got worse. Someone egged my house, slashed my tire, left threatening notes. I filed police reports, installed security cameras, kept documentation of everything. The trial was on a Tuesday in March. I wore a navy suit Julie helped me pick out. Looked professional, credible, not like the crazy old woman Kevin had tried to paint me as. The courtroom was small. Just the judge, a court reporter, our lawyers, and a handful of people in the gallery. Kevin's friends on one side, mine on the other. Kevin and Tasha sat at their table looking miserable. Kevin wore a cheap suit that didn't fit right. Tasha wore a dress that was too tight, holding Dylan on her lap. Obvious strategy, make the jury sympathetic by showing the baby. Except there was no jury, just Judge Martinez, a woman in her 50s who looked like she'd seen everything. Patricia stood for opening statements. Your Honor, this is a simple case of financial exploitation. The defendant systematically manipulated his 62-year-old mother into giving him nearly $400,000 over 6 years with repeated promises to pay it back. When she finally said no, he retaliated by filing false reports and harassing her. The evidence is clear. Kevin's lawyer stood. Your Honor, this is a family dispute being weaponized in court. Mr. Turner's mother willingly gave him money to help with his family. There was no expectation of repayment. These were gifts from a loving grandmother, and now she's using the court system to punish her son for we're not even sure what. Judge Martinez looked at Kevin's lawyer. Counselor, if these were gifts, why do text messages show your client saying he'd pay her back? Family communications are often informal, Your Honor. That doesn't constitute a legal obligation. We'll see. Ms. Morrison, call your first witness. Patricia called me to the stand. I swore to tell the truth and sat down, my hands folded to keep them from shaking. Patricia walked me through it, every year, every dollar, every broken promise. Ms. Turner, when your son first asked for help with the apartment deposit, what did he say? He said he'd pay me back as soon as he got his first few paychecks. Did he? No. When you continued paying his rent month after month, did you want to? No. But every time I tried to stop, he'd tell me about an emergency or a bill or something they needed. He'd say, just one more month. It was never one more month. Did you ever tell him you couldn't afford it? Many times. He'd say I should take out loans or borrow against my house, which I did. I took out a second mortgage to keep paying for his apartment. Patricia showed the bank records, transaction after transaction. $5,400 on the first of every month for 6 years. Kevin's lawyer cross-examined me. Mrs. Turner, did your son ever force you to give him money? He used guilt and manipulation, but he never physically forced you? No. And you continued giving money voluntarily? I gave it because he's my son, and he made me believe he needed it to survive. But you gave it voluntarily. Under duress of losing my relationship with my son and grandson, yes. The lawyer smirked like he'd scored a point. Judge Martinez didn't look impressed. Patricia called Kevin to the stand. He swore in, sat down, tried to look sympathetic. Mr. Turner, you make $70,000 a year, correct? Yes. And your rent is $5,400 a month? Yes. That's $64,800 a year. Your salary after taxes is approximately $53,000. That leaves you with negative income before any other expenses. How did you plan to pay your rent? My mum offered to help. For how long? Until we got on our feet. It's been 6 years. Are you on your feet now? We're getting there. Are you? Your wife hasn't worked in 2 years. You haven't paid your mother back a single dollar. When exactly did you plan to get on your feet? Kevin shifted uncomfortably. Things have been hard. Mr. Turner, I'm showing you a text message from November 2023. You wrote, "We've built our budget around your support." You can't just pull the rug out. Can you explain what you meant by that? I meant we were counting on her help. You built your budget assuming your 62-year-old mother would pay your rent forever. Not forever, just until then. Until when? Until she ran out of money? Because that's what happened, isn't it? She has nothing left because you took it all. Objection. Kevin's lawyer stood, argumentative, sustained. Rephrase, Miss Morrison. Mr. Rajan. Turner, did you know your mother took a second mortgage on her house to help you? She didn't tell me that. You never asked where the money was coming from. Kevin hesitated. I assumed she had savings. Did you care where it came from as long as you got it? That's not fair. Answer the question. I thought she could afford it. Patricia pulled out more evidence. The APS call. Mr. Blah. Turner, on January 15th of this year, you called Adult Protective Services claiming your mother was showing signs of dementia. Correct? I was concerned about her behavior. You were concerned. Or you were angry she'd stopped giving you money. I was concerned. Had you seen any actual signs of dementia? Confusion? Memory loss? She was acting different, making irrational decisions. By irrational, you mean saying no to you? Objection. Overruled. Answer the question. Mr. the question. Mr. the question. Turner. She wasn't acting like herself. The APS worker who visited your mother found her completely competent, paying her bills on time, managing her affairs perfectly. The only thing that had changed was that she stopped paying yours. Isn't that right? Kevin's face was red. I thought she needed help. You thought she needed help, or you needed her money? His lawyer objected again. Judge Martinez overruled again. Patricia wasn't done. Mr. Turner, I'm showing you a text message where you told your mother to sell her house to continue supporting you. Did you send that? I was just suggesting options. You suggested your 62-year-old mother sell her home of 30 years so you, a 35-year-old employed man, wouldn't have to pay your own rent? I didn't mean it like that. How did you mean it? We needed help, and she has equity. So yes, you wanted her to sell her house to give you money. Kevin looked at the judge. She's twisting everything I say. Judge Martinez spoke. Mr. Turner, just answer the questions honestly. That's all that's required. The afternoon session was Tasha's testimony. She cried through most of it, talked about how hard it was being a young mother, how they struggled, how they needed help. Patricia was gentle with her at first, then went for the kill. Mrs. Turner, you haven't worked in 2 years, correct? I've been raising our son. Many mothers work and raise children. Why can't you? Dylan needs me home. Or you prefer not to work while your mother-in-law pays your bills? That's not. I want to work. It's just not feasible right now. When will it be feasible? When Dylan's older. He's 9 months old. How much older? When he starts school. So you plan to not work for another 4 to 5 years? If that's what's best for my family. At whose expense? Tasha started crying harder. Janet offered to help. We didn't force her, but you did manipulate her. You used her grandson as leverage. You cried to get money. You made her feel guilty for having boundaries. Isn't that true? I never manipulated anyone. Patricia showed the texts. The ones about Dylan going to foster care, the ones weaponizing access to the baby. Tasha couldn't explain them away. Closing arguments were brief. Patricia laid it out clearly: systematic financial exploitation, false APS report as retaliation, harassment, and a clear pattern of manipulation. Kevin's lawyer tried to paint it as a misunderstanding between family members. Judge Martinez took 30 minutes to review the evidence. When she came back, her expression was stern. I've reviewed all the evidence presented, the text messages, the bank records, the testimony. This is one of the clearest cases of elder financial exploitation I've seen. Mr. Plick, Turner, you systematically drained your mother's finances while she was in a vulnerable position. You made promises to repay that you never kept. When she finally set boundaries, you retaliated with false reports and harassment. Kevin's face went pale. I'm ordering Mr. Turner to repay Mrs. Turner to repay. Turner, the sum of $387,000. Given his current income, wage garnishment will begin immediately at 25% of his gross income. I'm also ordering Mr. Turner to pay Ms. Turner's legal fees of $18,000. The restraining order remains in effect." Kevin's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, 25% garnishment will leave my client unable to pay his basic living expenses." "Then perhaps Mr. Turner should have considered that before exploiting his mother for 6 years. The garnishment stands." Kevin slumped in his chair. Tasha was crying, the reality hitting them. 25% of Kevin's $70,000 salary was $17,500 a year. It would take 22 years to pay back what they owed. And in the meantime, Kevin would take home $40,000 instead of $53,000, $3,300 a month instead of $4,400. They couldn't afford their lifestyle anymore, not even close. 6 months after the trial, I'm sitting on my back porch drinking coffee and watching the sunrise. It's quiet, peaceful. For the first time in 6 years, my bank account isn't being drained every month. The wage garnishment started immediately. $17,500 a year. Kevin's employer sends me a check every month, $1,458. I put it straight into savings. At this rate, it'll take 22 years to get my money back. I'll be 84 years old. But at least I'm getting something. And more importantly, they're finally learning to live within their means. I heard through mutual acquaintances what happened after the trial. Kevin and Tasha couldn't afford their apartment anymore, not on $3,300 a month after rent. They had to move. They found a 2-bedroom apartment 40 minutes outside the city. $1,600 a month. Smaller, older, not the lifestyle they wanted. Tasha had to get a job. Full-time at a grocery store. Minimum wage. She posts on social media about how hard it is, how tired she is, how unfair life is. I don't comment. I just watch from a distance as they live the life most people their age already live. Working, budgeting, struggling, growing up. Kevin stopped posting about me, stopped bad-mouthing me publicly. I think his lawyer told him it could affect the case if I sued for defamation. Or maybe he finally realized how bad he looked. 3 months after the trial, I got a letter from Kevin, handwritten. "Mom, I know you probably won't read this, but I need to say it anyway. I'm sorry, not because of the court case or the money. I'm sorry because I used you. I treated you like an ATM instead of my mother. I don't know when I became that person, but I did. Tasha and I are in therapy now. We're trying to figure out how to be actual adults. I'm not asking you to forgive me or to drop the garnishment. I'm just saying I finally understand what I did to you. And I'm sorry. I read it 3 times, cried a little, put it in a drawer. Maybe one day I'll respond. Maybe one day I'll be ready to have a relationship with my son again. But not yet, not while the wound is still fresh. For now, I'm focused on rebuilding. I paid off my credit cards, all $22,000. It took the first 16 months of garnishment payments plus my own savings, but they're paid off. I'm working with a financial advisor to rebuild my retirement. It won't be what it was, but at 63, I still have time. I refinanced my second mortgage to a lower rate. I'll have it paid off by the time I'm 75 instead of 82. My house is mine again, really mine, not at risk, not leveraged against someone else's life. Julie and I have coffee every Tuesday. She was there through all of it. The trial, the aftermath, the healing. "How are you doing?" she asked last week. "Really doing? I'm good. Better than I've been in years. Do you regret it? The lawsuit?" "No. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. Suing my own son. But it was also the only way to get my life back. Have you seen Dylan? That's the hardest part. I haven't seen my grandson in 6 months. The restraining order makes it complicated, and Kevin and Tasha haven't reached out to arrange supervised visits. I think they're still punishing me. Or maybe they're ashamed. Either way, I've accepted it. If they want Dylan to know me, they'll make it happen. If they don't, that's their choice. I can't control it. What I can control is my own life. And for the first time in 6 years, I'm choosing myself. If you've stayed with me through this whole story, if any of this felt familiar, I want you to know something. You're not selfish for having boundaries. You're not cruel for saying no. You're not a bad parent or grandparent for refusing to sacrifice your entire future for adult children who won't help themselves. If stories like this resonate with you, stay connected. You can like the video and subscribe. We talk about the hard truths here, the family dynamics that hurt, the choices that cost everything but save you in the end. I'm 63 years old. I lost 6 years of my life and $387,000 to a son who saw me as a bank account. I'll spend the next 22 years getting that money back in small monthly payments. But I got something back immediately that was worth more than money. My dignity, my autonomy, my right to say no without being destroyed for it. Kevin and Tasha are learning to be adults now, working, budgeting, living within their means. It's hard for them. I see Tasha's social media posts complaining about exhaustion, about how unfair it all is. And part of me wants to say, welcome to real life. This is what most people do every day. This is what I did while funding your fantasy. But I don't say it. I just watch from a distance and let them figure it out. Maybe in a few years, when the anger has faded and they've grown up, we can have a relationship again. Maybe I'll get to know Dylan. Maybe we can rebuild something real instead of something based on money and manipulation. Or maybe we won't. Maybe this is how our story ends. Mother and son separated by a lawsuit and a restraining order. Grandmother and grandson, strangers. I've made peace with both possibilities. Because here's what I've learned. You can't love someone into loving you back. You can't give enough money to make someone respect you. You can't sacrifice yourself into mattering to people who only see you as a resource. At some point, you have to choose yourself, even when it costs you everything, even when people call you selfish, even when you lose relationships you thought were forever. Because relationships built on what you can provide aren't real relationships. They're transactions. And the moment you stop providing, they end anyway. I just chose to end it on my terms, with my dignity intact, with a legal judgment that said what happened to me was wrong, what he did was exploitation, I deserved better. The court validated what I'd known deep down for years but was too afraid to admit. I wasn't the bad guy for saying no, I was the victim for saying yes too many times. Now I wake up every morning in a house that's mine. I drink coffee I bought with my own money. I make plans for my future that don't include funding someone else's. I'm rebuilding a retirement account. I'm paying down debt. I'm living within my means. I'm doing all the things I told Kevin and Tasha to do. And it's hard. It's really hard starting over at 63 with nothing. But it's honest. It's real. It's mine. And that's worth more than 6 years of pretending everything was fine while I disappeared. So if you're reading this, if you're in a situation where family is draining you dry and calling it love, if you're sacrificing everything and getting nothing back, if you're afraid to say no because you'll lose them, you've already lost them. You lost them the moment they started seeing you as a resource instead of a person. The only question is, will you lose yourself too, or will you finally choose the one person who's been waiting for you to fight for them all along? Yourself. I chose myself. After 62 years of putting everyone else first, I finally chose myself. And I'd do it again, even knowing what it cost, even knowing what I lost, because what I gained was worth infinitely more. My life, my dignity, my peace, and nobody, not even my own son, can take that from me again.